I am unashamed. What about you?
So, I am coming today from Clarksville, Tennessee, which Jace is about an hour northwest, I guess, of your place down in Franklin. And it was really interesting, Dad, because to get here for a bit, I went on James Robertson Parkway when I was in the Nashville area, and then I went through Robertson County as the county right before I got to this county, whatever this one is.
Yep.
So I feel like I'm kind of, among some of the home folks up here.
I've actually looked into that. I'm thinking about going up there and metal detecting it, see if I can find
I
something.
think there's a lot of our roots in Tennessee.
There are. We came through here. The famous James Robertson is definitely in our lineage.
Yep.
But you know what's even better, Jace? Look, I found here in Clarksville, there is a Black Rifle coffee shop, like a store. So I stopped by this morning, so I got my double black diamond. I mean, I really feel I feel like I'm there, but I'm here.
That was a seal moment out. I mean,
I guess that was so earth shattering it just causes a pause in the proceeding.
Phil looked at me, looked at him like,
no comment.
I don't know. You're drinking the same kind of coffee, so you feel like you're here.
Well, I just feel like I'm there, but
I guess
I'm surrounded by Robertsons. I'm drinking Black Rifle coffee.
Oh, okay.
I'm at the Trenton Crossing Church of Christ. It's kind of our roots and our heritage. So I spoke here last night to a group of Utes here, several hundred of them, and it was really good. They were excited about. Of course, we had a bunch of podcast listeners. Some of them drove from Kentucky. I mean, anybody within a couple of hours drove to be here yesterday when I spoke at this church, and they let me do it. So, Jace, last night I was late to the proceedings because they had like some music groups and stuff like that. I was late to the proceedings because we got down to the fourth quarter of the Kansas City versus
the Bengals.
Joe Burrow, the Bengals, yeah. And I was so into that, I was like, I know I'm late, but I can't leave. I'm not going to be able to leave until this is over.
I felt like I was watching the LSU National Championship game. I was up there, which you got to remember the Chiefs, they have Clyde Edwards-Helaire and
the
honey badger. But there's something about Burrow. I mean, and look, I'm going to make a declaration. I made this to you on the text message. Because now you have two states rooting for Joe Burrow because he's from Ohio. But then when he came down here, he fell in love with Louisiana. He won a national championship, with the help of the team. But I think he's the type of quarterback that makes everybody better, obviously. Something about him. But now, as this continues, this is making, outside of the campus and the people involved at Ohio State University, because this is becoming one of the dumbest people ever to let go. Whoever made the decision of Burrow, he ain't got it. You know what I mean? I'm like, there's an embarrassment level this is reaching. So outside of that, wherever Ohio State is, where are they at? Columbus, Ohio. Outside of Columbus, everybody in Ohio and Louisiana is pretty fired up. But they're probably fired up too. They're probably claiming him now. Yeah, we trained him, sent him down there, even though we basically
He started here.
They're like, you can't start for us. Go find somewhere else. He's like, okay, national championship. Then a couple years later, the Bengals, you got to remember 2 years ago, they won 2 games.
Yeah.
This has been quite incredible.
It has.
It's just and it wasn't like, that defense yesterday is really what made the impact. But still, they gave up 21 points in the first half. They're at home. Kansas City, Mahomes has only lost one other time to Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And then, so it was pretty exciting.
Oh, I have to say, if they hadn't have scored that late touchdown in the first half, I probably would have saw it because about one more score, they almost scored at halftime, and I was like, nah, this is I was a little afraid of a runaway But man, once they scored, and then I was like, well, you never know. You know, Burrow, they came back last time.
And they got a little cocky, Kansas City, when there's 5 seconds left. They're on about the 5-yard line, and they're like, no, one more play. Let's run this. And they threw a little screen pass to that guy's real fast, heel, and they tackled him. And then all of a sudden, timeout, too late, missed that field goal. Well, that field goal would have come in handy, as it turned out.
When you turned out to be the difference in the game. That's
well,
exactly
I think
right.
momentum, you can't underestimate momentum. But we had, yesterday kind of signified our last day of duck season, and it was the first time I had gotten to go in a week, because we're filming this little show that I wish I could tell you about, but I'm not sure why I can't get into that. I did find some humorous things. I think I can talk about this. These people they come down from all over the country. And I noticed something this past week. They don't understand about gumbo mud. They don't. So I pulled up at one place, and I looked, and there's just a vehicle. I could tell it was theirs. It's just in the middle of the yard, just sunk. They had a trailer behind it. I thought, why would they pull right there after a 2-inch rain? And so then I look up, and they're trying to get the vehicle out. I said, hey, of course, this is not my lane. This is their. I said, you're going to get that one stuck too. And they're all looking at me and one of the guys said, well, we got to try. I said, nope. Nope. It's not going to work.
Don't do it.
Yeah. And so they went down there, and they got that stuck. Well, then, the person in charge around there, they had heard me say that. They're like, how did you know that wasn't going to work? I was like, do you want me to go down here and give these people a tutorial on Louisiana gumbo? And they were like, please. So I went down there, and I said, look, here's the deal. After a 2-inch rain, you never get off the road anywhere, ever. I said, number 2, there's an invention in the tire world. It's called mud grips. If you don't have them, then you can't pull somebody out. Because it doesn't matter how big the vehicle is, how big a motor it's got. See those tires? And the one you tried to pull this one out, I was like, the tires are just sitting there spinning. So one of the guys said, I have mud grips on mine. I was like, go get yours and pull them out. Take the trailers off. So it was just a strange fun. People just don't understand. But I wouldn't know either. I'm not getting on them. You just wouldn't know that.
Well, in the middle of that, various dilemmas people fall into. Your mama has a pattern.
Oh, boy.
A lot of times when we go duck hunting, we're in the blind and time is passing. So she'll get up in the morning. We all leave at 5 o'clock in the morning. We're gone. We're in the woods down here. So many a time when you get home about 11:30. So you left at 5 in the morning. You're back at 11:30, and you walk in the kitchen to see what the cook came up with.
Because you're hungry.
You're hungry now.
And you're actually more hungry than normal.
More hungry than normal. So
Something
I walked over there to the cabinet there. I mean, what do you call the thing where the other little stove is? It's the
island.
The island. The island is in the kitchen. I go in there. There's a note there. Like I've seen many a note located there. So I looked down, and it said roast put in oven at 8:45. So I looked down, and there's a note there. Roast is put in the oven at 8:45, and there was a period. That means whatever time you have when y'all usually roll in, usually between 11:30 and 12.
So 3 hours on the roast. What is the
Yeah.
cooking time on a roast?
About 3 hours.
Okay.
So I looked down there. I said, "Hey,
Roast
all
and
right."
gravy.
That old stone with me. I said, "Let's."
So you
get
put
in
the
on
rice
this roast.
in, or she
I
did?
said, "I'll tell you what. Let's get the roast out, and we'll just see how the roast cooked, and then we'll, put any sides we need." Stone. I said, "Get that roast out of there." So he gets his, it's keeps it burning your hands. What do you call him?
Potholder.
Pot holders. He goes in there and he reaches in the oven. He pulls out a big old thick boiler, roasting pan. So I got a butcher knife in one hand and a fork in the other. I'm just fixing to kind of cut into it. Well, he sets it down and he reaches and he takes the lid off like this. He takes the lid off.
Presentation.
For those listening,
And I'm looking.
Taking the lid off.
I'm looking, and for about 5 seconds, Stone didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything. I'm looking.
Didn't turn the oven
Lo
on.
and behold, the oven was on
Oh.
when he took it off. But
roast.
There's
no roast.
No roast.
No roast.
Just an empty pot?
Empty pot, and it's hot. Because it's been cooking, just sitting there in the oven
For 3 hours.
at 325 degrees, 3 hours. So I'm looking at it. I'm speechless. I said, well, where's the meat? So Stone looks at me and said, I don't get it. I said, I don't either. We looking around.
Was it like a clean black pot?
Clean black pot.
Oh, so she
one
had
of them
never
big
put
iron
it in
pots, and it's just got a lid on it, but there's nothing in the pot.
Yeah.
So I look around.
I thought maybe it evaporated.
So
Dad, you were the opposite of Arby's. You have no meats.
I have no meat. So I'm saying, well, what could have happened? So I looked over there if there's any more pots. I said, which one has the roast in it? So I look on the stove over here, and I picked the lid up. It's been browned. The potatoes are there. The carrots are there. It's been browned, but it's just sitting there. Wrong
boy.
pan in the oven.
Oh, boy.
So I'm just getting you ready when your woman gets she's about a year behind me. When your woman gets in the 70s, make sure you check the pot before you put it in the oven. That way you get your meat in the oven. And
Yeah. So what do you do there? Do you put it just in the oven now?
you put it back in there and you wait another 3 hours before you eat it.
Go take a nap. Eat something to tide
That's
you up.
a first. I've never had that one. I've never seen that one before. Have the oven on, have the pot in the oven, but the other one is the one where the meat is, and this one is empty.
So what did Mom say? I mean, because
I
obviously
called them up because I thought it was a pretty funny thing. I called them up, and when I told my woman what happened, she's telling the two women with her, all of them, going up in years, but Brown, Lynn Brown. But when
Blondie.
she was giving them what happened, and every time she'd tell them something else, they'd just, I mean, they were cackling. I mean, they laughed.
So who did she blame it on? Because I'm sure she blamed it on one of her
Miss
handlers.
Kay said she had the roast all prepared, salt and black pepper, browned in the oven a little bit on a little olive oil, whatever. We had the carrots and potatoes, and she said she told Lynn to put it in the oven. Lynn picked up the wrong pot. I think I could have told by the weight. But anyway, she grabbed the wrong pot, put it in the oven, and cooked the pot for 3 hours and nothing in it.
Well,
Well,
which goes back to you have too many pots, which gets into the hoarding issues again.
Yep, it happens.
So,
Well, and also at Mom's age now, she has a lot of helpers because she's not supposed to be picking up heavy stuff, and so she's got some issues.
That's
so
right.
every time you add in another handler, you also add in apparently the propensity for missing the boat there.
The good news is no tempers flared over that. It was just a big laugh. We all laughed, and that was about it.
Well, let's take a break. So, Jace, with all this, you got filming going on the show, doing the podcast. How are you sleeping these days? Are you sleeping well?
I'm sleeping fine, just not in large quantities of time.
Which you've always been a little less on the sleep than Dad and I. Anyway, that's just kind of the way you roll, right? Well, one of the ways I know you get a good night's sleep is because, like me, you sleep on a Helix mattress, which is a fantastic product that you and I discovered from the podcast. And you went on, just like I did, took a little quiz, told them how firm you like your mattress, how soft you liked it, and then you got a great mattress, correct? So here you can do the same thing. We want you to check these guys out at helixsleep.com/unashamed. They have a 10-year warranty. You get to try it out for 100 nights risk-free. That's almost, a third of a year. but you're going to love it. So trust us. Helix is also offering up to $200 off all mattresses and 2 free pillows for our listeners at Helix, Helix, sleep.com/unashamed. So that's helixsleep.com/unashamed. $200 off, 2 free pillows, and a great night's sleep, whether it's a little like Jase or a lot like me. I'd have to say, Dad, that especially as you've gotten older, you and Mom, that you guys have put a principle out in marriage, and you talk about it some, that's really important, I think, for anybody's marriage, and that is to have a sense of humor. Because if you can't like laugh at some calamities, I mean, you're going to be in trouble all the time.
You are correct.
So I'll tell you what happened. Here's something I can tell about the filming. So Missy comes down on this trip with us, and we're all staying in this Airbnb, and we're going out to this historical place. Well, the day, let's see, she put on a pot of beans at the Airbnb in a crock pot, which, because Jeb and Jessica, they love that, and I do too. It's elevated, because she makes this spicy cornbread with it. Al, you've been over many times.
Oh, yeah.
Had that.
Very good.
I mean, it's top 3 meals here. Well, during the day, somehow or another, they order lunch for you, these TV people, and mine got left out. I mean, everybody goes up, because we're out in obscure places, So they look around, they're like, nope, looks like you got weeded out. So I'm like,
Oh, boy.
I'm going back treasure hunting. So I just take off while they're eating lunch. So I worked up an incredible hunger. So that night, I ate an obscene amount of beans and rice and cornbread. Because, I mean, you just think, I've been out there all day eating. I think I had eaten a granola bar out of their little crafty thing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the next day, we go out there, we're hunting, and I found something, and these rows in this field were really high, and I had my knees positioned in a certain way, and I was excited about what I found. And, the way we do it, they're kind of following everybody around, and when there's a hit, they come gather around you. But I'd gotten in a position that was uncomfortable, and they had some technical issue, and they were like, hang on. But the longer I sat in this, I felt like a human, what are those things? Back
like
and
the
forth, back and
hummingbirds, like the bird that goes in the little...
No, a seesaw is what I was thinking. I was
seesaw,
on this row, and I was going like a seesaw, and my knees started hurting incredibly bad. And I thought, they were like, hang on. And I was like, I can't hang on here. And so when I elevated myself just to get some pressure off my knees, I'm not kidding, it sounded like a bomb went off, because I had eaten all those beans the night before. And I couldn't help it. It was uncontrollable. And it went on for like a long time. I mean, like, I'd say 45 seconds. It was just... And I kind of got tickled about it.
I've never heard a lower bowel tract to last that long. Problem.
That's what I'm saying. So I look around.
Hey, Jase, Jay's dad can count on one hand.
Well, right.
One hand.
Phil,
all the times.
You have superhuman power when it comes to the
I've
lower.
never been teetering out there on a row. I'd have just made myself comfortable. I mean, what they
Tell you what, it was so
Don't move.
It was so crazy that I actually thought, I have found there's some yoga instructor out here somewhere who would die for this positioning.
Oh yeah.
Because I mean, I have figured out a way to relieve the inner gases that have been trapped. So look, none of these people are laughing, because they're taught you never laugh. We weren't filming. We were waiting on a technical issue. Well, I see this body over here and there was actually no women around me at the time. So it wasn't like I was being rude in front of, mixed company. Yeah. We're all men here. And it was uncontrollable. All do it. Yeah, I could help it. So I see one person kind of in the sitting position, just moving. And I look, is the sound man. And then it hit me. I thought, can you imagine what that sounded like in his ears? And he got tickled, and he just couldn't quit laughing. And I thought, and he's like 50 feet away, so he's not experiencing. Well, here's what's weird. So I went back down to the position where they want him, and they're like, hang
I'm
on.
guessing, but he was out of Los Angeles, California.
I'm not sure where they're from, Phil, but
Oh, you can
couldn't
tell.
he couldn't stop laughing. And so when I rose back up, same thing. It was just like the exact replica. It just, and I thought, does this have something to do with my age? Now, when I said that, everybody lost it. They all, and I thought, it's okay to laugh. And let's just stop and have a laugh. But,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where I was going with that.
Byproduct.
But I was,
It's a byproduct of brown beans.
too many beans. That's what it was.
many beans.
And I got in a contorted position, and it just, there was nothing I could do about it, you know?
Yeah.
But then when we got back home that night, well, we all laughed about that, you know, for 10 minutes. Because I thought it was embarrassing, but I couldn't help it. What could I do?
Well, the difference, I mean, I'm not, my company doesn't produce that show. If I'm producing that show, I'm like, you run that. That was hilarious. That would have been so funny to have on the show. I mean, I realize it's lowbrow humor, but, you know.
It is lowbrow, but there was nothing I could do about it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It
was
wasn't like you planned it.
uncontrollable. And like if you heard it, you would have said, there's no way someone could do that on purpose. That's why it was cut. But I'd been down so long, and it had just created the perfect storm. And there it went.
The travails of being a sound man.
Yeah, that
'Cause
was funny because I thought, boy, he's got the best.
Did
of
you
both
ever say
worlds here.
something to him after, like once it was all
Oh,
over?
yeah. He's like, what did he say? He said some, you know, he made references I wasn't familiar with, but it was like, it was a C4. It sounded like a C4 explosive went off. And then the echo just continued and continued and continued and continued. I was like, hey.
Hey, leave it to a sound guy to have a weird way to describe somebody farting.
I actually said, well, you know, it was a bomb of sorts. Well, I was going to.
Hang on, Jay. Before you go there, I wanted to mention, because we're going to wind up in 1 Corinthians 7, but we got about a week left on our blazetv.com/unashamed. We're doing this new, and by the way, I talked to a lot of people up here in Tennessee that are listening to the podcast that love it. A lot of them have subscribed, so they're loving the Unashamed OT, which is basically another hour of content a week. We do a bonus segment for each podcast, and we do that on blazetv.com/unashamed. And you still got about a week if you want to sign up to save $15 off a 1-year subscription. So what you do is until February 7th, use the code MOREUNASHAMED, M-O-R-E unashamed, and that's going to save you $15 on a yearly subscription to be able to get the overtime. So, and not only do you get overtime, you get their whole network. So like all of Dad's in the Woods, all 800 episodes are there if you never got a chance to watch that, along with all their other content. So it's a good deal. We encourage you to do that. Blaze is obviously the reason we're on the air. So I wanted to mention that. Go ahead, Jay.
No, I was just going to say, so I don't know why I get a little nervous when Missy's on the podcast or, you know, on the show.
She's coming on next week, by the way, so you got a week to get nervous.
See, now how come I don't know that?
Well,
why
because
why wouldn't she say, "Hey, I'm coming on the podcast"? And she didn't say a word.
I think she's wanting to surprise you. I probably ruined the surprise.
Gee whiz, you did. But what I was going to say is, because this chapter that we're in, I told y'all before we started, this is a difficult chapter for me.
I found it very unusual, let me put it that way, that when it gets to marriage, with all the text about us being the bride of Christ, you would think out of all an explanation on how to behave yourself when you have this powerful sex drive at the young age of 18 or 20, when marriage starts coming up, you know, as a pattern. For the matters you wrote about, how about this opening line out on the way to have a great marriage? It's good for a man not to marry.
Well,
I mean, we're fixing to have a discussion of marriage, and the first thing out of the Apostle Paul's mouth is, I'm going to talk to you about marriage. You know what? It's good for a man not to marry. Now, there's the old Dan. We call him the eunuch because he's chosen not to marry, and some people thought we were making fun of him or whatever, but we weren't doing that at all. We were telling Dan. I said to him, it's cheaper. It's good for a man not to marry. And, of course, everybody was looking at me like I was crazy. Think about it. These writings are right at 2,000 years old. And a guy that's been handpicked by Jesus to preach the gospel and discuss all the matters that come up in the process, they're dealing with marriage, but it's good for a man not to marry. But there's so much immorality. Each man should have his own wife and each woman her own husband. Then he starts going into the roles of the husband and the father. And
well, let me mention.
I gave a lesson on it, basically not this particular, not right here, but I was just saying, whatever happens when you marry someone, just make sure that you're a man, she's a woman. Make sure of that, and then proceed. I said, but you're going to have to learn how to roll with the punches and keep your spiritual fervor and watch yourself as far as being belligerent and all of this. You're going to have to love your wife, I mean, a whole lot, and a continuing love and a relationship, or it's going to go south on you, because it happens all the time.
That's right. Let's take a break. So we've talked a lot about pro-life here lately because we just did the big march up in D.C., which was amazing and fantastic. And we got some big cases coming up this year. One of the groups that was a sponsor of the big march, but also is a sponsor of our podcast, is a group called 40 Days for Life. And Jase, when one episode you weren't on, we had the CEO of this organization on the podcast with Mom and Dad and Lisa and myself. Really good group, help a lot of people. Kind of one of those frontline groups in the fight on abortion, and so we love what they're doing. They've got centers all across the world, which is fantastic, and they've come up with a new resource, which we are super excited about, and it's the quarterly magazine is what it's called. So this idea is that 40 days is about fasting and praying for life. And so they've got this magazine called Day 41, which is free. And you go to 40daysforlife.com/magazine to be able to get this gift and be a part of their ministry. They've also got a great book there that you can take advantage of, which is the What to Say When, the complete new guide to discussing abortion. So get 41 at 40daysforlife.com/magazine. Check out their website. They got a great campaign coming up that's going to kick off in over 600 cities on March 2nd. So check them out. So right off the bat, I mean, as far as an overview, it is an interesting text, and I know Jase has the theory he's going to tell us about. But let me mention, since we're in that first verse, that and I did a little bit of, we talked about the Greek study, but I did a little bit of look at the Greek on this, because in the margin of your NIV, that same passage says it's good for a man not to have sexual relations with a woman, which is a little different take than saying it's good for a man not to marry, because then he comes back and repeats that same thought. Here's what the Greek said. Here's the exact Greek interlinear. If you just took the Greek words in there, and here's what it says in the Greek. It is good for a man not to touch a woman. So in the original language, that's what Paul said. So I think it's more a relationship probably to he's going to define sex and where it's supposed to be, as opposed to the marriage covenant itself. So it's kind of a continuation of what we talked about in chapter 6. And the idea is that, look, sex is designed for marriage. But to your point, Dad, Paul says later, I wish you were like me. Even though this may be a little bit different contextually, he's saying, I wish you didn't even have to worry about sex, because you'd have a lot less to worry about. So, I mean, that theme is throughout the text, no doubt about it.
Yep. And it's so much danger attached to it. In the Ten Commandments, about number 6 or 7 there, don't commit adultery. So,
Well, I did find it interesting that Paul, who was never married, said, I wish you wouldn't marry because there's a lot of problems and a lot of headaches to deal with. But Solomon, who had 1,000 wives, in Proverbs 18, said, it's good for a man to marry. He who marries finds favor in the Lord. So it is an interesting take on different cultures and different ideas, even in the Bible.
Again, he about 3/4 of the way through, Jase, in 1 Corinthians. If you marry, you've not sinned, and if a virgin marries, she's not sinned. It's okay to marry. But this still stands, and everybody always laughs when I read this, and they say, that's not in the Bible. Those who marry will face many troubles in this life, and I want to spare you this. He's basically saying staying single now is a good way to roll.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. And again, I think the thing that now let's do an overview of the whole chapter. And Jason,
by the way, that's 7. That's 7.
Before we get
28.
too far down this rabbit hole, I just wanted to say, I mean, this is the first phrase which neither one of you mentioned, which I thought was interesting, because he says, now for the matters you wrote about. So I got the impression, based on reading that they
asked questions about this.
Asked him questions, so he
Correct.
stops and addresses them. He addresses
Correct.
them. But this reminded me of that, what happened, and you remember in Matthew 22:23, when the Sadducees came up, which they said there was no resurrection, and they said, what about the woman, because Moses had told them, if your husband dies, then the brother of the widow marries, and now she did that, 6 or 7 times?
Right.
And then at the resurrection, well, whose wife should be? They came up with a scenario to try to trap Jesus from the old law, saying, well, if this resurrection is going to happen, which husband? That wouldn't make any sense. So there's no resurrection. That was kind of their deduction. And he's like, well, at the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. But before he said that, he said, you're in error because you don't know the scriptures or the power of God. And I feel like the reason that reminds me of this is because they evidently, after you read this chapter, you realize they asked him every question under the sun about marriage.
That's right.
And, what if, because you got to remember back here.
They were trying to get a loophole to where they could continue with sex without being married.
Well, the Epicureans, you remember that in Acts 17 or whatever, the Epicureans are mentioned in the Stoics or whatever, and that was before he got to Corinth. And this Gnosticism, which was, there was a belief going on that you couldn't have sex with your wife. You couldn't experience the pleasure, which I think he was referring to here.
Could be.
But that was going on back then.
Correct.
Yeah, and so, which it seems crazy, because he says, since there's so much, it is good for a man not to marry, but since there's so much immorality, each man should have his own wife. Where was I getting that from? Oh, where it says, don't deprive each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, verse 5, do not deprive each other. Of course, these are it should be a man's favorite verse in the Bible.
Yeah.
Because you go in there and like, hey, don't deprive. I mean, I'm kind of kidding, but not really. So what I was going to say is, when you think about it, all the different scenarios that you could do, I keep giving the big picture of this whole letter to the church at Corinth, because the backdrop is you have the 1,000 prostitutes going out working the streets. They have some serious gender issues, which we're going to get to in the next 2 or 3 chapters. There's a lot of immorality going on. We just went through 1 Corinthians 6. So this is kind of the backdrop. And so I thought, big picture, when you think about the plan of God, God made if God is truly creator of all people, and he made them male and female. If you go back to Matthew 19, where you referenced the eunuch reference, where he gave the same discussion about marriage, he said some are eunuchs because they were born that way. Some have been made that way by men, and others have renounced marriage for the kingdom of God. I mean, that seems to kind of mirror what Paul is going with here to the Corinthians. But he also, in Matthew 19, Jesus gives this foundation. He said, God created them male and female. So here's my point. If you look at the plan of God, if he did make everybody male and female, and that would mean we would be sons and daughters of him. And so and it mentions that several times in these letters about us being the sons and daughters of God. Well, we're all made by God. So we're all made on purpose, for a purpose by God. We're all children of God. But not all of us get married. That's optional.
That's optional.
So I think the reason this is kind of difficult for us, because there's a lot of options. I mean, look, even in my own marriage, when we did our premarital counseling, we filled out this form, our compatibility. They call it a compatibility, what do they call that, Al? It sees what you have in common or whatever. I forgot. It's like a compatibility test. Well, I was curious because I thought, at face value, I don't feel like I have anything in common with this woman outside of Jesus. So I was curious on what they were going to come up with. So when...
Hang on, Jace, let's take a break. So Jace is always talking about stock market, which is one way to invest. Another way is real estate, which is healthy, I think, probably, when you say, Jace, to have real estate as well as stock market. And
you got to be diversified.
So one of the tools that's really helpful when you're talking about real estate, or really any purchase, is being able to have a really high credit score. That's going to help you get the best interest rate to save you the most money over the long haul, especially if it's a car, a house, or some expensive purchase. And so you want to get that score up quick. And one of our sponsors is a group called ScoreMaster. And so they help boost your credit score by an average of 61 points, which saves you tens of thousands of dollars just on that alone. But sometimes it can be even more than that. So check these guys out. Try ScoreMaster for free and see how many points you can add to your credit score. Go to scoremaster.com/Phil. That's scoremaster.com/Phil, and try to get that credit score up so you can really diversify your portfolios.
So you mentioned one of your mentors, who was my premarital counselor, Carl and Barbara Allison.
Yep.
Well, I kept asking him about it because I was curious. I said, what about the compatibility thing? And he kept putting it off. I was like, how long does it take to get results to, Well, the bottom line, he was putting it off because it basically said you two do not need, you're incompatible. So I kept pressing him on it, and he finally said, brother, how's your prayer life? And I was thinking, what? He's like, because with man, some things are impossible, but with God, all things are possible. I was like, so you're saying we're not compatible? He's like, if we went by that score, it basically said y'all need to just go your own separate ways. It's never gonna work.
It's good for a man not to marry to begin with.
That is basically what he was saying, and this is my premarital
Interesting
counselor.
when you're on the deprivation part. In other words, the husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also to his wife. Do not deprive each other except by mutual consent. Talking about compatibility, you say, I tell you what, let's don't have sex for a while. And for a time. He says, now don't get carried away here, because you can pray, devote yourself to prayer, just it strengthens your spiritual part. Then come together again. Now, so you hadn't had sex for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, or 2 days, whatever. Then come together again, the sex is back, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. It's a being married, you have an option if you even delay the sex part, since that's all you're getting, biblically speaking, is your wife. That's it. So if that's all you're getting, you look at that and you say, I understand where we don't want to go a whole while, because if I can't control my sexual urges, we need to turn that loose among each other here. We don't need to try to go around.
That's what
one of you is going to live like whatever, where there's no sex. Oh, they don't like sex. I've heard them say it. Yeah, we don't like to get into that. So there's a lot of sexual, what shall I say, problems that arise.
Oh, I'm
can
sure
really
sex
get out of hand in a hurry because of that lack of self-control.
Exactly, Phil. Because they were saying, "Oh, we're just not." Because the Epicureans were teaching that, look, you just need to do everything in moderation, but the sex life causes anxiety in the marriage, so let's just not do that.
Yep.
Well, that's one thing to say that. It's another thing to try to pull it off. I mean, there's been other people.
You're going down a slippery slope when you go down that road.
Well,
my opinion.
To finish my earlier thought, what I was going to say is so here when it comes to marriage, and it comes back to that Matthew 22 where they didn't know the scriptures or the power of God. I look at my wife and I, what makes our marriage great in my mind is because we focus on being a son of God or a daughter of God first, because we believe God created us for a purpose. Then we focus on being, because we are technically brothers and sisters in the Lord, so we're all have that in common. That's never going away. It's a spiritual relationship rather than putting all your faith in the physical, because no matter whether you believe in God or not, the physical part of the sexual relationship, that's going to end. Either on this life or the next.
It's going to end.
That's why he said you don't know the power of God. But if you focused on those issues as far as the foundation, I believe your marriage has a better opportunity to succeed. Because I was going to get, first you got the plan of God, which shows us he's a father. I'm getting this back to the triune in nature. Then you have the purpose of God, which what is God's purpose? To reveal his love and grace to humanity. That's why he created us.
So look,
can I just finish though? And so then he sends Jesus to do what? To show everyone how the Father is, and then he loves us and wants us. Well, that's our purpose. So my wife and I, the reason we came together to be married was that we were going to be a team to go out and do God's purpose, which leads to the third thing, which is through his power that happens, which then gets into the Holy Spirit. So what I'm saying, I didn't understand 1 Corinthians 7 because I think they wrote him about everything controversial, saying, how do we make, I wrote this down, how do we fit Jesus into our situation? And where I think they missed it was that you take your situation, his reference, and you give it to the Lord.
Yep.
There's a totally different perspective in doing that, because all these situations can be different. But it's a matter of priorities, just saying, oh, well, fix this. How do I fix this? How do I fix that? When we're out there supposed to be doing the purpose of God. That's all I was just going to say.
I would simply say that there's no way to really get a good handle on this except by one thing: time. Now, you guys, I call y'all the young bucks, but both of y'all getting gray whiskers. What you'll find is now y'all are in your 50s?
50s.
Close enough.
In your 50s, you look at sex inside marriage one way. Trust me when I tell you, mid-70s, next stop 80, you begin to understand that there's far more important things, amazingly, as sex. It's a lot of fun, but when you get to be 75, my age, you begin to get some perspective that it's not better than eternity. It's not better than living forever. It's not better than having peace of mind between you and your woman. It becomes not a non-issue. You still have a little fun at 75, but you say, it's not. It's got a spot over here, but it's not the guiding force of your life by no stretch of the imagination. You grow up, and time passes, and there come a time when you say it won't be a big issue at all. These people were primarily that never doubted. There were a lot of young people here.
I
So
think
the
he
Apostle
brings that
Paul-
up in 29 when he says time is short. From the wives should live as if they had none. Those
Yeah.
who mourn if they did.
There you go.
The world's passing away.
There you go.
I think let's take our last break. I think that's the point. I want to comment on a couple of things. So one, Jase, you're right. We're basically trying to interpret a letter where you only got half of the information. We didn't get the questions. We only got the answers. And so that makes it a little difficult, right? Because he's specifically dealing with something. I think the clue to that, Jase, is in verse 10. He says, not I, but the Lord. And he was quoting what you talked about, Matthew 19, what Jesus said about divorce and it's better to stay married. And then from verse 12, he says, I, not the Lord, meaning to me, he's basically saying, here's my advice on how to deal with these specific situations that you sent me. Now,
Because
Paul,
Jesus didn't handle it in depth.
Well, he didn't
No.
specifically
Right.
say it, which
He
is
just-
why I went through the big picture. I mean, Jesus was more worried about the big picture. Something where everyone is involved is that you have to acknowledge at some point, every human being, on where did I come from? Am I a son made by God or a daughter made by God or not? Or did I come from seaweed and fish water? That's why I gravitated toward that, because that's what Jesus did. And I'm always looking at his model. If you want to go to Ephesians 5, so he goes through the whole thing about the marriage, because men and women are different, obviously. And we've talked that till nauseam.
Not so obvious in 2022.
Well, according to some.
Yep.
But my point of Ephesians 5 is, bringing it up, he gets down to the end and he's like, I'm talking about Christ and the church. I mean, you each have your roles in your little marriages. Not to demean that, but compared to you being married to Christ and then we're the bride of Christ, that's the bigger picture.
That's my point.
Yeah.
What? So to prove your point, I think it's right there in the text. So in the end of chapter 6, you remember when he was talking about sexual immorality, he said, your body belongs to the Lord. In other words, your body is his and he is yours. Remember when he said that when he was talking about you don't unite
Well,
with the
I think it was like he was basically presenting this scenario where the prostitute is competing with the Lord for your body.
That's right.
It's a good way to look at it, I think.
See, a lot of other things too, Al, while you're there. You two, there you are, Al, and here you are, Jase, and there's more, family group, but you're the result of sex. You are its result.
Well, thanks for clearing that up.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying. You when you look at it, it's a very what's the word? It's a very profound act, the sex act. And from what I read in 1 Corinthians 7, it's critical that you keep that in mind, especially a guy been as sinful as I was in my past. I get it now, but at one time, nope, I didn't get it. But it did produce you two, Willie, Phyllis, Jephthah. So for that, I'm grateful. But as the time passes, your relationship with each other as a family unit far outweighs the way you got here.
Which,
That's
by the
all
way,
I'm saying.
that to your point with Phyllis, who is the product of an affair, but
Yep.
at the same time, she is a gift to not only us but also to the world. Yesterday, she was
Even that can turn out good.
That's right. Yesterday, she got to speak for the first time in Missouri, and it happened to be on the 2-year anniversary of when she found out that she was your daughter. And she shared that very thing. And so I was so proud of her because she sent me her speech. But I thought, man, look at the value of her life throughout her whole life. We didn't know her till she was 44. But
Yep.
that, to your point, that does produce. Procreation is obviously a big part of that. And just to close this out, because we're running out of time. So, Jase, to that point about the body, belonging to Christ, when he says in verse 4 of chapter 7, the wife's body does not belong to her alone, but also to her husband, the same way the husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also to his wife. I think he's piggybacking on the same thought that you mentioned.
Yeah, he froze.
That if we understand that we're a part of the body,
we're almost. Oh, there you go. He's back. We lost you for a second, Al.
so whenever we're connected to the body of Christ, which is what he said, that's why you don't want to bring in a prostitute, something outside of your relationship with Christ. He follows that up by saying, even when you're married, two become one flesh. Therefore, two bodies become one. The wife belongs to the husband belongs to the wife. And so even in a physical realm, he's saying you treat this just like your relationship with the Lord.
Exactly. That's why I'm a big proponent when people, they use the Matthew 22 and they're like, oh, there's no marriage. You won't know your wife in heaven. And I'm like, oh, sure I will. It's just the physical aspect. There's no longer any need for that. But look, she's been my best friend, my sister, and a daughter of the Almighty, and we've been working together. We've become one. What God joins together, let not man separate. I mean, it evolved through the Spirit of God into something that he's using. I'm 100% sure that I'm fully aware that she's my wife in heaven, just not in a physical way, but in this special way that God,
Again,
is using.
all it takes is time.
Right.
Time.
Well, and I think, Dad, the challenge is what we'd like people to do is even at a younger age to figure out you don't necessarily have to wait until you get older. Why not apply some of those principles now that it's not the most important thing? I mean, I know when you're young, it feels like it is. And again, God built us to procreate. That's part of it, and to enjoy each other. But at the same time, it's not the most important thing in your life. It
but
should
it's
be.
Also,
America has turned it into idolatry.
it's also like
exactly.
the judgments that were going on and the things that are lawful and the things that are unlawful, that he mentioned in 1 Corinthians 6. They were coming up with these questions to try to just fit Jesus into what they wanted to do. And I think there's something to be said about whatever your situation is, what I picked up from Paul here, whatever it is, if you surrender to Jesus as your Lord and you use God's grace as a motivation for future decision making, you're going to have the right heart to listen to what the Lord wants you to do through his word and through his Spirit that's in you, no matter what situation, because there's a lot of situations you can be in. That's why it's a confusing, but everybody gets so hung up on connecting all the the tissue that's in here and crossing the T's and dotting the I's and like trying to then have a creed that they can go around and police in marriage, and I think they missed the point entirely.
That's why it says when he gave the list in 1 Corinthians 6, neither the sexually immoral nor idolaters. Idolatry is right there because they take it.
We're going to talk quite a bit about that as we go forward. We're out of time on a regular podcast. Just want to encourage you guys to check out Unashamed on Blaze TV, which we'll do we're just have an OT over there. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of getting married just in a practical sense. So we'll do that, and then we'll pick up in Chapter 7 next time.